Welcome to the podcast, Speaking to Influence, Communication Secrets of the C-Suite. I'm Dr. Laura Sicola, your host, and our focus is on mastering communication as an essential leadership skill so you can command the room, connect with the audience, and close the deal in any context. My guest this week is Dr. Robert Cavagnol. He is the president of St. Luke's Clinic, serving people all across southern Idaho and Oregon. He started his career as a Navy surgeon. He's got a master's degree in healthcare administration, and he is the proud father of two lovably crazy teenage boys. I think crazy teenage is probably redundant, but nevertheless, two lovably crazy teenage boys who he claims has a little too much of him and not enough of their mom. Want to hear more about that as well? Dr. Cavagnol, Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. I'm excited to be here.
We're looking forward to this conversation too. Now, tell me a little bit about that crazy part of you. What's your fun fact?
Sure. So last year I turned 50 and my wife asked me, what do you want to do for your 50th birthday? And I said, I want to hike the Grand Canyon. So I did what's called the rim to rim, where I started on the North Rim, hiked all the way down to the Colorado River. It's about a mile down and a mile back up to the South Rim. It's 24 and a half miles and it took me about 9 hours.
Wow.
Beautiful hike, wonderful scenery, really felt like a sense of accomplishment and I loved it.
That is absolutely amazing. It sounds like you must have amazing pictures.
Unbelievable. I'll show them to you later.
Yes, that sounds good. And was it harder to climb down something that steep or up?
Definitely up. So it was 29 degrees when I started on the North Rim and 105 when I made it to the top of the South Rim. And so just to give you a sense of the temperature change, but it was a pretty steep finish to the climb and pretty grueling.
Yeah, at 105 degrees, I would imagine even if it wasn't 105, climbing something that steep would feel like it's 105. But it's a dry heat. Isn't that what they told you? But it's a Yeah, I don't buy that argument either. That just 105 is 105. I don't care what the humidity factor is after a while. So, and by the way, thank you for your service to our country.
Oh, thank you.
So now tell us about St. Luke's Clinic. What's your 30-second elevator pitch?
Sure. So St. Luke's Health System is the largest health system and the largest private employer in the state of Idaho. We also have the only children's hospital for Idaho. We serve over 500,000 patients for our health system. The clinic is the physician enterprise arm. So that's all of the physicians and advanced practice providers. That's what I'm accountable for. And me and my team, what we do is we make sure that we have all the right people to take care of patients and the patients are getting the care that they need.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And what is the most important leadership communication lesson that you've learned, and how did you learn it?
I would say listening is the most important communication lesson I've learned. I'm really working on improving my empathetic listening. Too often, we as leaders and just normal people, when we listen, we're listening to respond.
Yeah.
And we're formulating our response in our minds instead of putting ourselves in the speaker's shoes and trying to understand it like they do.
And when did you realize that perhaps this is something I ought to work on?
Well, I'm big at asking for feedback from my team. And I think I've heard this more than once from several of my team members that people even said it felt like you weren't listening to me. And, hearing that from people that you lead and care about really hits home. And it's something that I wanted to really work on and improve.
It's good that when somebody gave you feedback that was as transparent as it felt like you weren't listening, you heard that. Because you'd be surprised how many wouldn't.
100%. No, totally agree. And that feedback as leaders, that's so important and valuable.
How did when you get feedback that's that direct, it felt like you weren't listening, does your ego naturally want to just go into deny and defend mode? Or is it easy at this point to be able to receive something that's like, yeah, this was not so perfect?
I think it's natural to think back to a time that invalidates that feedback. Well, gosh, we just had a conversation yesterday and I was listening intently to that. And so, there's that joke around, my wife was telling me I'm terrible at two things. One of them's listening and the other one, I have no idea what she was saying. Right. And so, right. But unfortunately we tend to have that tendency to go back and try to figure out how that feedback is invalid. And the thing that was most helpful for me is I heard it from more than one leader. And so that really helped it penetrate and for me to take it personal.
Right. It's a lot easier when it's just one data point of someone, well, they like to complain about everything, or they weren't paying attention, or they didn't say it clearly, or when it comes to more than one, it's like, perhaps what's the line that once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, three times is a pattern. Like, okay, maybe I ought to start paying attention now. Now, what about if you've ever taken any of those personality assessments of some sort, like the DISC profile, Myers-Briggs, Strength Finders? Which one of those have you taken, and how does it influence? How does what you learned from it influence your communication with others on your team or in your organization?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the disc profile.
Mm,
And as a surgeon and as a physician leader, you could probably guess I'm a D, D
sure.
sub I. I feel like the disc is so helpful in multiple ways. The first is understanding ourselves and
Mm,
being self-aware of how we approach problems and conversations. But it also helps me when I'm engaging in other folks, and I know that they're a C or an S, and that the tendency would be for me to dominate the conversation and for them to struggle to be able to clearly communicate their ideas and their thoughts. And so that allows me to enter that conversation with that mindset of I have to be real intentional and to have that individualized approach for that leader and say, okay, I'm going to ask them to start, and I'm going to start with them and listen to what they have to say and ask them to tell me more, and really encourage them. Some folks, they just need that time and space to share their ideas.
yeah, it is hard. I'm a high I. I know that's shocking to you as a podcast host, but the uh, it's can be so easy to get excited about a topic that we take over. And I'm sure I've done that for probably 90% of my guests at some point, where they'll have talked about something and then my response to their response is longer than their original response. Hey, it's my show. But nevertheless, we still want to make sure that we are listening to them. So tell me about a time when you made the wrong call and had to fix it. Who did you approach first and what did you say to them?
Yeah. So when I joined this organization, I was going through my assessment, trying to figure out what was working and what wasn't, and came across our goal setting process and felt like it was really broken. And unfortunately, my bias for action took over, and I just started making changes and communicating those to our team. And the leadership mistake that I made was several. It was not bringing together a group of people, understanding how did we get to this point where we were, and really appreciating the work that had gone into that goal setting. So the first person that I acknowledged this mistake to was my boss and my supervisor, and just saying, "Hey, I want you to know, I've come forward with a big drastic change. It hasn't been well received. I need to think about how to backtrack this a little bit and how to communicate to the team. Number one, I heard you that you're frustrated with this rapid change that I didn't include you in. And then second, please help me to come up with a better solution." And so my boss helped me, think through that. And I did get the opportunity to connect with my team, and we had a reset. But I learned a lot of important lessons there. And one of them was around collaborative leadership. And the other one was, before you go into a new organization and try to drive a whole bunch of change, it's best to understand what led to that original decision to begin with.
Yes, yes. And I think it's so easy when you feel like there's an urgency to move things forward to make changes. If something's broken, you don't want to dawdle forever trying to fix it. It's like let's fix, let's get results, let's take action. And I forget who it was that said, "If you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over?" And especially when there's that many people who now you gotta fix a lot in the relationship, in the systems, in the processes, all those kinds of things. So um, and so give us like once again the when you approached your boss first, what was it that you said to him? Was it him, her? I shouldn't make that assumption.
Yeah, I just said, "Hey, I got to tell you, I screwed something up."
Mm,
And he laughed a little bit and appreciated my transparency and owning it. And we talked through it. And it was more a lot of it was the how and how I rolled it out and the process that I had gone through. I don't think he disagreed with the decision to make a change, but how quickly it was done, the lack of collaboration, the speed, all
yeah.
those things. And so he helped me sort of identify those different opportunities and also gave me some advice on how to roll it back.
And then when you had to turn and start to talk to the team about it and rolling it back with them once you got his buy-in and approval, how do you open it with them? Especially if it's one thing if you're managing up to the boss and then you have to come to your team who's supposed to look to you as leader and you don't want to lose face in that way either. How do you start that conversation? Was it one to one, little by little, working them through, or like sitting them all down at the table and saying collectively, here's the deal?
Yeah, I'm pretty direct, And so I sat down with the team as a group and I said, I just acknowledged like, hey, I screwed this up. And I shared my intent. Look, I want to tell you I had good intent here, which was, to make the changes that I thought we needed to make. However, here's where I made the errors. And it wasn't collaborative. I didn't ask for your input. I should have brought us all together and gotten different ideas and different thoughts. And so I think the team was grateful for, number one, that owning the mistake,
Yep.
and two, sort of admitting it, and then the opportunity to reset. And I do think we got to a better place when we got everyone together and we collaboratively came up with a new plan.
Yes. So I want everybody out there who's listening to hear that it's okay to acknowledge mistakes. This is both managing up and managing down, and starting with the very technical expression, I screwed up.
Yep.
Right. That's okay to say. And people, frankly, they kind of knew it already. So they're just glad to hear you acknowledge that you're not the only one who doesn't see it. And it saves face. It saves dignity. It restores dignity to be able to acknowledge, accept. And what I appreciate, everybody is concerned when mistakes are made of whatever sort, especially when it's interpersonal kinds of mistakes. There's the two sides of the coin of intent versus impact.
Mhm.
It's like, well, I didn't mean to do anything bad. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I didn't mean to do this wrong. Yeah, but you did. And yep. So being able to acknowledge, yes, on the one hand, this was what I was trying to do. You hope that if they are listening, they can at least appreciate where you were coming from if they had no clue of like what caused this harebrained idea. That, okay, well, that helps to put some stuff into perspective, but then you still hurt me this way. So
Mhm.
owning the apology and your ability to articulate, here are the things that I did wrong here, not just, I'm sorry, I made the mistake, but I should have taken your input. I should have sought your feedback. I should have done this. I should have done that. And those specifications, I think, make so much more of a difference. So thank you for sharing the detail in that. Now, what about a time when you decided to take a big risk? What was at stake, and how did you communicate your decision to key stakeholders?
Yeah, so we had a group that came forward and was making several demands that we couldn't meet. And we were very transparent with them. Hey, here's what we can do, and here's what we can't. And they started to posture and threaten, if we don't get our way, we're going to resign.
Mm,
And this was a group that's providing a critical service, and having a gap in that service was going to be a big problem. And so at the end of the day, we sort of called their bluff, and they did resign and leave. And thankfully, we also had a plan B and a plan C in order to make sure that our patients didn't lose the care that they needed. And so there was about a 90-day period in there, and during that transition, when it was bumpy, when it wasn't all flushed out, and there were some nervous folks calling me and asking me, hey, are we going to continue to provide the service, and what about covering the emergency departments, things like that. It ended up paying off because we got a group that it's ended up providing better service, and we're happy with the transition. But for a period of time there, it was pretty bumpy. And so, I was just transparent with all the key stakeholders. Here's where we are. Here's the challenge that we're facing. I made sure that all the different facilities were aware of what was going on, and also, hey, we're also in the background working on another plan that can, another group that can step in and provide this service, to reassure them that this wasn't, we weren't just throwing in the towel and saying we can't find anyone. So yes, it was a pretty big gamble, and ended up paying off in the end.
And that's hard when somebody gives you an ultimatum. It's one thing to threaten certain things or to protest, et cetera, but to give the ultimatum of we are collectively walking unless, uh, when do you bend? When do you break? When do you versus stand your ground? And it sounds like you made a tough decision that was probably not popular initially.
Not popular, difficult, and we were still trying to get to a solution with this group.
Mm.
And so even though they took that stance, we continued to have conversations, and again, sharing what we could do and couldn't do. And at the end of the day, we couldn't meet their request, and we had to go in a different direction. So I think it ended up working out for the best, but it was a gamble.
Yes, yes, but this one paid off.
Good.
So hopefully you didn't run to Vegas the next weekend to continue to see if the streak would continue. All right, Rob, I think this is a great time for us to transition a little bit into our 24-hour influence challenge. So this is a chance for you to challenge our listeners directly to take one step that they can complete within 24 hours to have more influence. How would you like to challenge our listeners today?
So think back to the conversation we had around listening
Okay.
and empathetic listening. And what I would say is too often when we're in a conversation with someone and they're sharing a story, something interesting that happened with them or their family, our inclination is in an attempt to relate to that person.
Hmm.
We want to say, yeah, and let me tell you an example of how that happened to me or how my family experienced that, sort of that one-upsmanship.
Mm.
And instead of doing that, the challenge that I would give to your listeners is stay in the moment, stay present, ask two more questions of inquiry, stay curious, and continue to encourage the person to tell their story. Don't
Mm.
feel like you have to compete. Don't feel like you have to, throw out the time that your kid also got straight A's or, won the award. Let them have their moment and let them, shine in that and just encourage them to keep telling their story.
Yes, I love it. And it's so crystal clear. And in our heads, that sounds so easy. And yet there is that urge to just say, me too, me too. Let me show you. And, in some ways we're looking to bond, and in some ways we are proud of whatever it might be. But yeah, just resist the temptation just once. See what it's
And
like.
going back to your point around intent versus impact, right? I think we have good intent. We're
Yes.
trying to show people that we're listening, that we're engaged, and the impact, unfortunately, is we turn the spotlight from them to us,
Hmm.
and I don't think that's what we mean to do.
Exactly. So we want to make sure that our impact reflects our intent. And here's a great way to do that. Love it. Okay. So then, Rob, what's a communication skill that you weren't born with and had to learn? How did you develop that skill?
Yeah, my wife would tell you this one. I wasn't born with patience.
Mm.
I'm careful because anytime you pray for patience, God does things that teaches you patience.
Mm.
And so, one of the things that I have to be really intentional about is slowing down and not forcing decisions when the team's not ready to make them. Different people move at different speeds. Some people want to go back and reflect and think about it and gather additional data, and that's okay. We want to move at the speed of the group, not necessarily at the speed that I'm comfortable with. And so, sometimes when I'm in a meeting, I count to my head in my head when I ask a question and I want to wait to see if anyone raises their hand. I have to ask the group, are we comfortable making a decision today, or do we want to wait a week and people can think and reflect on this? And so, unfortunately, I wasn't born with patience, but I'm trying hard to learn it.
I think I can relate, not to break the rule that you just set down, which is to not say, yeah, me too, except, yeah, me too. Patience, not one of my God given strengths either, but that's terrific. And I love the distinction between, you ask for patience, but we're asking to be given patience. We're never given patience. At best, we're given the opportunity to practice or to learn patience,
Right.
which is the loophole in the cosmic ask for whatever and you shall receive. No, it's like, no, I didn't mean a chance to learn it slowly. I just kind of wanted it bestowed. Yeah, doesn't matter what your intent was in your question. It's not going to happen that way. So
Right.
get used to it, roll up the sleeves, join the train and learn those skills. All right. Now, what about a time when you had to speak up as the lone voice of dissent or disagreement? What happened and how did that go?
This can be hard. An example that comes to mind is our team was considering moving forward with a project in the community in partnership with some other community members, and it didn't make sense to me, and I didn't agree with the direction that we were going. Everyone seemed to be on board, and the train was moving forward, and I just raised my hand and said, team, I got to share with you. I think this is a mistake, and here's why.
Hmm.
I tried to clearly articulate the concerns I had. This was going to divert our leadership attention. It was taking away dollars that could be better spent other places, and just stated my case. Now, at the end of the day, the team decided to continue in the direction that we were going, and that's okay, right? It's not all about that my ideas are the ones that are getting through, but I felt good that I was able to courageously voice that opposition in the face of, everyone else feeling like this was the right way to go. And so, yes, it was difficult, but I can live with it. And again, they don't all have to be my ideas.
So tell me, and I'm going to resist the urge to say, so here's what I'm understanding. And I would love you to reframe it for us, that what is it that made it easy for you to receive the no? Whether it was an explicit and direct no, or just recognizing in the end that they didn't go with your recommendations. Why is that okay? Why did that feel okay?
Yeah, a few reasons. One, I felt heard. They stopped. They paused, asked me questions. I think one of the leaders even said, "Tell me more."
Hmm.
Right? Which is a great encouraging phrase when you're trying to listen and really understand. And I did feel like I was heard. Several of the team members sort of articulated, the why behind the decision to move
Mm-hmm.
forward, but it wasn't like we spent 30 seconds on the topic. It was, several minutes of further discussion. And so I know I had the opportunity to voice my opposition, and it was received. That message was received, considered, and the decision was to continue to move forward. So I think the critical thing is I didn't feel like they blew me off.
Yeah.
I felt like they took me seriously.
Yes. I think that's really what people want. Yes, they want to have their way, but almost more importantly is to know that they've been respected, that they've been heard, their perspective has been taken out into account and weighed. And I think as long as people do genuinely feel that, they can accept almost any answer, at least far more better. More better, far more. Yeah, I speak English. Let's try that again. But you get the point where I'm going with that. So remembering to acknowledge the validity and as you mentioned, things like tell me more about that, help me
Mhm.
understand, as opposed to your as a parallel with your earlier point about the natural reflexes to say, oh yeah, me too. And let me tell you my story. The when people say or when people present an argument that is contrary to the direction that you're planning to go, it's natural to want to cut them off quickly and say, no, 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 that's not right. That's not what we're going to do. And just put the kibosh on it right then and there, as opposed to letting them speak up. And of course, I would presume there's also a difference between when someone speaks up and says, I have a concern, I feel like we need to address these things, versus just blurting out, I think that's wrong. I think we should do this. I think that, um, or being disrespectful in the way that they approach it as well.
For sure. And I would say, the key here is I do feel like I was genuinely heard, and I had my opportunity, right? And so with that, I was okay with the decision that the group made and moved on.
Yes. So then, was there ever a time when you went to bat for someone else? Who'd you speak up to? I can speak. What is wrong with my tongue today? I'm not even going to take this one out. I'm not going to cut it. How do you like that? Tell me about a time when you went to bat for somebody else, and who did you speak to on their behalf?
Yeah. So, physicians are human beings, and we're flawed and fallible just like everyone else is.
Mm,
Sometimes we encounter physicians who are struggling and who are impaired. And so it's incumbent upon me to, number one,
impaired. Let's get clear on that. When you say impaired, we're talking.
so it could be for a multitude of reasons. Maybe they have an undiagnosed medical problem. Maybe they've got a substance issue. Maybe they have some cognitive decline over time. And so
Mm,
impairment can take the multiple different forms.
okay.
My number one obligation is to make sure that our patients are getting safe care. And so we can't take an impaired physician and put them out in practice and taking care of patients. I also have an obligation to the physician to take care of them. And when I sit down with these physicians, it's a very difficult conversation to have. But that's what I lead with. I lead with empathy and compassion. And I say things like, look, we care about you. We're worried about you. Here's what we're seeing and hearing from your colleagues, from your practice manager, complaints from patients. And so we need to make sure that you're okay. And, if everything is fine and you come back to practice, great. But if you have something that needs treatment, we want to make sure that you're getting the treatment that you need. And so in those situations, I often have to advocate for the physician to send them off for the evaluation, to maintain their privileges, to give them the chance to figure out what's going on and then get them connected with the treatment that they need. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And I've got several success stories of physicians who had whatever was going on was addressed and they were able to come back and practice. And of course, we continue to monitor those folks and make sure that we're providing safe care to patients. But it's a situation where, it's a balance where we have to advocate for safe patient care and the physicians.
I would imagine those are really difficult conversations to have on both fronts. How to talk to that physician, him or herself, and say, "I've noticed something that is not a topic you're going to want to talk about," and then to, of course, talk to the whoever else, the powers that be, and put this person on the radar, so to
Mhm.
speak. So, how do you initiate either of those conversations?
Yeah, so I'd share with you one of the things that I do is I rehearse quite a
Mm,
bit. And so I spend time sort of practicing, what I'm going to say, not memorizing,
mhm.
but, even role playing those conversations because they are really difficult. And you're talking about potentially ending someone's career
Mm,
if it's a situation where they've got something that can't necessarily be fixed.
right.
And so again, when I sit down with the physician, I'm pretty direct, and I just share like, look, here's what we're here to talk about. But I make sure they understand how much I care about them, and my goal is to get you back practicing.
Yes.
And I want to retain you in the community, and I want you to be able to continue to see and take care of patients. It has to be safe, and we have to feel good about that, right? When I'm talking with the medical staff or the board of directors or other folks, it's pretty matter of fact. Here's the situation that we have, and here's what we're doing about it. They want to make sure it's being appropriately addressed, right? And so I have to convey the confidence that yes, we do feel like here's the appropriate evaluation, here's the treatment that we're planning for, here are the steps we're making sure we're ensuring there's good follow up and there's monitoring.
Yes. Yes, and I appreciate starting those conversations with, "We care about you," and we're putting that balance again, just recognizing that, um, somebody it does care about them too. It's not just that you are being held with your feet to the fire and, "Yeah, we've noticed this thing," and you're done. People need to hear the other side of it as well. Okay, now finish the sentence for me. "I wish I was better at explaining" what? To whom?
Yeah, I wish I was better at demonstrating vulnerability to my team.
Mm,
Vulnerability is not something that comes natural to me. I was raised by a Marine, showing weakness. You didn't want to being vulnerable with showing weakness in our house, and so it's just not a skill that I acquired growing up. And what I've
mm.
learned as a leader is that being vulnerable and doing things like admitting your mistakes, like we talked about earlier, actually endears you to people and helps to create those connections
Yep.
and builds relationships. And so I wish it did come natural to me, and it's something that I really just have to work at.
It sounds like you got it down from the examples that you shared. What's the tension point still?
It's just uncomfortable, and I don't know how to do it well, right? I don't know necessarily what to share and how far to go. And so I'm not declaring victory. It's something that I'm working on. And I think it can be as easy as admitting mistakes or talking about things that you struggle with. You don't want to try to project this image of I have it all under control and every part of my life is perfect, right? And so even sharing stories about funny things that happen where your kid does something or you burn the dinner or something doesn't go right, it shows your human side to your team, and that helps to endear them to you.
I agree 100%, and I have had plenty of those burned moments one way or another. But I'm glad that you're sharing um, the internal monologue of sorts. Well, I don't want to go to how much do I? When is it too much? Too little? Too soon? Not enough? So to recognize that these are questions that leaders inherently struggle with. Just because you're at the top doesn't mean you don't vacillate inside and argue with yourself about how will this be received? Should I do this? It's still difficult. It gets easier, but it never necessarily gets easy. Am I hearing that correctly?
Oh, 100%. And so I've worked with a leadership coach before, and he's talked to me about like selective disclosure. It's not
Yes.
about telling everything that's happening in your life, but find those things that you can share where it, again, shows the human side of you, shows that you're fallible, that you make mistakes, that you're having a hard time with something. And even something as simple as, at the beginning of a meeting, like, gosh, I was really struggling to come up with meaningful agenda items, for our discussion today. Right. And all you're doing is you're opening up the kimono a little bit and showing people your soft inner side. And it takes courage. It takes a willingness to try things. You're not going to get perfect every single time. But again, for me, it's just not natural, and it's not a comfortable thing. Just like we talked about patience, right? I'm trying to learn to slow down and be more patient, and I need to learn how to demonstrate that vulnerability for my team.
I couldn't agree more as far as the challenge and the head trash that goes on inside. Hearing all those little voices arguing with each other can be confusing sometimes. So with that, how can people learn more about St. Luke's?
Yeah, so if you go to St. Luke's online, there's all kinds of information about our locations, our doctors, our clinics. That's a great place to check us out. There's employment opportunities. So if there's physicians, nurses, respiratory therapists, techs out there looking to join our team, there's a whole section on careers and how you can join St. Luke's. So tons of information there.
That's terrific. And we'll put it in the show notes, but what's the website?
I think it's stluke'sonline.com.
Oh, it's literally St. Luke's. Not just go check out St. Luke's, which happens to be online. Find the stluke'sonline.com. Okay. Like I said, we will put that in the show notes. So great opportunity. Thank you for the invitation for employment opportunities as well. I think we always benefit from those. Rob, our time is wrapping up, but I have so enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Laura. I really enjoyed it as well.
And to everybody else out there, thank you for joining our conversation. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode if you have not yet done so. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or your platform of choice so that we can help even more people increase their confidence, presence, and influence. And finally, if you want to download my free guide to equipment recommendations for virtual influence, including my picks for microphones, lights, and more, go to speakingtoinfluence.com. I'm Dr. Laura Sicola, and you're listening to Speaking to Influence, Communication Secrets of the C-Suite. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Laura Sicola, and I want to sincerely thank you for listening to the Speaking to Influence podcast. If you love listening to these episodes as much as I love bringing them to you, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And please go to iTunes right now to rate and review our podcast in order to help us expand our reach so even more people can master the 3 C's to command the room, connect with the audience, and close the deal.
Thanks for listening to Speaking to Influence, Communication Secrets of the C-Suite, the show for leaders who want to speak with impact. The hosts, producers, owners, and media distributors of the show make no guarantees that the strategies and information discussed will result in profit or other success and may result in losses. The opinions and statements of the hosts and guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the owners, staff, managers, broadcasters, or sponsors of the show. No medical or psychological therapy or personal or professional wellness or relationship advice is offered in the show. You are advised to seek counsel on matters related to your health, family, relationships, job, or other business and legal matters from licensed advisors in those areas prior to making any changes in business or lifestyle. No information provided may be suitable in your situation. As always, take responsibility for the decisions and actions you take, including the reactions they may make in your work, family, health, and life.